So, you know, it was a blessing in disguise. I was kind of burnt out and decided to kind of go back to the roots where I wanted to be, which was painting. So I had time on my hands, and what I did is paint a series of portraits. There were 8 of them. One of which is in the show called The Golden Gown, which was the final painting I did of that series. And I did those paintings in order to see whether or not I wanted to do this, you know, to do art full time, because I know it's not an easy task. And after entering it into the competition called the RPS show in London, Royal Portrait Society, I got in twice, and I got to tell you, it was just really encouraging. So basically, I decided to go for it, and I spent 10 years really, you know, building up my skills and really enjoying myself until something happened in 2018, which is really important to state at the beginning, is I lost part of my vision. I actually lost all my vision in my right eye. It's something called optic neuritis. And the reason why I bring that up is obviously it kind of changed the course of everything in a fantastic way. But at the time, you know, it wasn't fantastic. But what it did was force me to, you know, look at painting differently. And the critical moment, and I was just telling Natasha about this beforehand, and I was like, oh, you know, I think I need to explain this, is when you have a canvas that's like this and you have the brush hitting it, when you have only vision in one eye, you lose your depth perception. So when I would go like this, I thought I was hitting the canvas, but I'd hit the canvas every time before I wanted to. So it was at the time I could not, you know, I guess a better way of explaining it is when you have a glass of water and you go to pour, I was pouring over here. I couldn't, you know, get that gap. So the long and the short, the short and the long, I decided to take this dot that I could repeat over and over again and add that into my painting. And so you'll see that that is showing up in my new work. So you know, that's a beginning. That's the story. Um, of how, you know, it all began. Do you have Natasha? You said you had some more questions for me.
Yeah. Um, well, I did want to ask when you lost your sight in your right eye and then you had to adapt your technique, and I can only imagine how incredibly frustrating it what must have been when you were trying to paint and you kept hitting the canvas. Um, and I'm almost wondering, since your work speaks to this defiance that individuals have, do you now kind of see your painting and the way that you adapted your painting as an act of defiance in and of itself?
It's a good question. Um, yes, I defiance because I wasn't going to let it stop me,
Hmm.
which is, you know, I've been knocked down, you know, I lost my business. Okay, well, what can I do next? And, you know, I lose my eyesight. Okay, what can I do next? And, you know, there'll be other obstacles, but, you know, there's somebody told me about a book called The Obstacle is the Way or is the Path. A few days ago, so I haven't read it yet, but I was like, it was very interesting. So yeah, the obstacle created a new path for me.
Yeah, that's a
Mhm.
great way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Um, well, I was also wondering how you situate yourself in the context of art history and modern art history. I mean, you're one of the few hyperrealist artists I think working today.
I, I'm 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 one of the few hyperrealist women working.
Sorry, that's what I
Um,
meant.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, no. Women working in you know, with work that has a defined undertone. And, you know, I was talking with somebody who was got me thinking about my influences and art history, and where do I fit in that. And you know I what I first want to say is that, to explain where the Defiance came from a little bit. And it was my upbringing. Wasn't that great? I'm not alone, no biggie. But when you're in a big family and you're the youngest, you have to yell louder.
Mm.
And so that's kind of where it started. I think that it continued as an adult and as an artist because I am a woman and I am middle aged and I am a hyperrealist female painter, and the art world is dominated by men. So I'm constantly fighting. And so I think that every time I'm painting something, little things will bother me, and then they just show up in my work, which is, it's fun. It's who I am. So it's great that way. But I started to think a little deeper to your point about art history and, you know, kind of where, what you see right now on the screen. Can you guys see these two paintings of the Sativa Sunrise and Shira, the green and yellow ones? Yeah? Okay, good. So I think of like three different movements that have influenced me. And, the first being Baroque and the Baroque movement. And you can see that with Sativa Sunrise that,
Mhm.
has that lighting. And, the second part movement would be the social realism. And that is sort of the defiant aspect. That's, the discontent of social realism. I express it by define, and then obviously going into the movement of photorealists and my love for a book of Salvador Dali that my mother gave me. And so, you put these all together and I say, well, where am I? I'm a woman in the 21st century. And I've been looking at it like, okay, maybe it's version 2.0. My work is version 2.0 of all of those three artistic movements put together.
Mhm.
And that kind of starts to make even more sense when we'll get deeper into where my work was and now is going. And it'll make even more sense.
Mhm.
So it's my work is really an intense form of hyperrealism, I guess. So yeah.
Well, for those who are kind of new to that term, hyperrealism, how do you see that? My understanding is that it grows out of this photorealism, but it tends towards narratives and socio-political messages, and perhaps photorealism is more focused on taking an objective approach to showing objects as they are, but
Mhm.
presenting them in a neutral way. Is hyperrealism just, do you see it as a departure of that?
Well, I always end up getting not confused, but I think that my work kind of fluctuates from photorealism to hyperrealism. So, for example, the oyster painting with the spoon that I think a lot of you know of, that goes into real hyperrealism, where it's really very, very tight. You almost unrecognizable as a painting. Photorealism is the same, but I always have trouble kind of differentiate them. But what I can say is that a photo is beautiful, it's gorgeous, but it's flat.
Mhm.
And I see hyperrealism, photorealism as really giving a painting, those photos translated into a painting, so much more emotional weight. You know what I mean? So, like, I'm on TikTok. Everybody seems to know that. And one of the videos that I do is a comparison of the photo to the painting. And, so many people are like, well, why paint it? Photography can do that. And so it's an ongoing battle, but when you put them next to each other and you show the world, you all of a sudden you realize, oh yes, there's a huge difference and the painting is alive. I
Mm.
love photography, obviously, the type of work I do. So I guess, yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah. I want to show. There we go. Yeah, yeah. I think that that's right. Taking, I mean, even when you are trying to faithfully replicate this photograph, um, it has it has a new life because it is a painting, and
Yeah.
you it's made by hand and created through, in the image itself, it's being filtered through your experiences and your eyes, right? um but I'm curious, how is it important to you to represent your women, or your women, the women that you paint
My
in
women.
specific ways, your women, right? Are you, because I feel like you can capture these emotions and these really kind of intimate moments, or really, really personal moments, so skillfully. And I'm curious about that. I mean, especially the female models that you paint.
So you want to know, what, well, I guess, there's, you if you hire a model, there's just, I guess maybe it's back to my days of being a graphic designer and, doing, photo shoots, and you have to find, you develop an eye,
Mhm.
uh, of somebody who's really photogenic and who's going to really give you that look that's going to express everything that is on her mind.
Mhm.
So, that's where it begins. The different stories behind all of the paintings always end up being something that the model and I are talking about. And a lot of times it's not the idea that I originally wanted to do at the photo shoot when I'm getting the
Mhm.
reference. You know, it develops into something else because we're talking. And I don't know, maybe I have an innate ability to be able to capture that moment. And when I do, I feel that those are the most successful paintings. In all of this, though, too, is very important for me to paint strong women.
Mhm.
I consider myself one. In looking at, art history, it actually got me thinking about, okay, what do I paint? I paint oysters and portraits and nudes. And I'm like, oh, okay, they all make sense together. You see them in all, older paintings. Um, but what bothers me about nude painting from the male perspective is that women are always sexualized. I mean, they just are. And for me, when I paint them, I don't think, sex and it's just nothing to do with it. It's always, these are strong women. And, right now, you guys are seeing this one. There are a few of them that I have that are full frontal, but not for a minute. Do you think that this woman is weak, or, that she's just sitting there waiting and pining for somebody to come and, whisk her away? No, these women are like, nope, sorry. So, you're showing this one right now. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Made
I
for walking. Yeah. This is definitely, a bit more on the traditional, a bit more romantic, but that defiance is just those boots. She's kind of looking at them, and saying, yeah, I got the boots on. I can walk. I can do my thing. Even though she's nude, I just think it's strong. That, I don't
yeah.
know. A guy looks at it differently. I look at one way.
Well, that's why I brought up this image specifically when you were talking about the nudes.
Yeah.
I think this woman, yeah, is incredibly strong, and even her posturing, she has her hands on her hips, which is a very kind of strong power pose. And yet she's resting all of her weight on one of her legs and the other one is kind of cocked to the side, and that kind of conveys this sense of ease, this kind of comfort she has in her power. And
Mhm.
yeah, and this is something, that I mean, as a woman, I look at this and not for a second do I think that this woman is void of agency,
Mhm.
or that she is just an object for consumption.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. Yeah. No, she's a very strong woman, and she's just looking down at those shoes. She doesn't even have to look at the look at the viewer.
Right,
It's yeah. So
right.
I'm glad you like that one.
Yeah. So did you want to talk about the kind of catalyzing work, the just try and stop me, or because I know that you had phases, right? That you had moved through a couple phases before arriving at what you kind of consider, at least from my understanding, to be this pivotal point.
Yes. Yeah. No, this painting is definitely a game changer for sure.
Hmm.
Um, well, a friend of mine had written an essay about my work as a whole. She had also seen all the works at the Arnot, and it was a very interesting take because I saw my work one way, but I had never seen it all in one room,
Hmm.
which brought me to tears almost. And I, there are different phases in my work, and it started off with the beginning where I really didn't know what I was doing. I hadn't painted since, I was a kid, and took on this massive project of 8 paintings. And so that was very much more impressionistic at times. And I didn't, my colors, I just didn't know anything about color. And so what happened is I was at a portrait conference, the Portrait Society of America in Philadelphia a few years ago. Um, and they had a critique table. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll bring my little mini portfolio of like 8 paintings. That's all I had. And the first comment was like, when she looked at this black tuxedo of, she's like, Nadine, there's more than black and white paints. I was like, okay, got it. It immediately was like, okay, you know what? I'm self-taught, if you guys didn't know, when it comes to, painting. And so I, what I decided to do is, what happened is I saw an ad somewhere for how to paint from a photo reference. And I was like, wow, you don't usually see classes like that because it's always so taboo to talk about painting from a photo. Um, and I was like, this is great. And the teacher was Paul McCormack. I don't know if you guys know him. He's an amazing teacher and artist. And I took the class. And at the end of the class, he invited me to be part of his class that he had on every Thursday for the whole day to, up my skills. He knew me, he knew my work, and he was just waiting for me to take the class. And so I spent 2 years every Thursday learning how to paint again. And that's sort of phase two, where I really spent the better part of, the past 7 years, 8 years developing my technique, my style, which got increasingly more photorealistic.
Hmm.
And I think I was reaching a point, it's interesting to impart a very important detail, which is that the self portrait that I did was done before I lost my vision. And that's important to say because, in phase two, you get to a point where you worked on the same thing over and over again, and you get a little bored, right? That's at least that's how it happened for me. And that was forcing me to say, okay, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to loosen up a little bit. I'll still use, the hyper realism because I love that. That won't change ever. But um, it, I kid you not, it was almost like 2 months after I finished it that I lost my vision. And it was really, I was really distraught. And, but yet I was already going in this path right before. And so now I see this obstacle, right, as the path that I needed to just get out of the boredom, the and so, that dot, which you'll see on this painting, the just try and stop me. It's a series of dots and lines and so where was I? I think that I was talking about phases. That's right.
Phase two.
So, excuse me?
Said phase two.
Yes, phase two. Well, phase two, leads to a point where I just wanted to do something new. I wanted to push hyperrealism further, but in my own way.
Yeah.
And so that is where I am right now. And it's really exciting because I I I just really love where I went with this painting.
Mhm.
I was using all these new techniques. I could still have it be hyper realistic, yet it's much easier. I'm not going to say that this painting takes me less time. It does not, but it does. It takes maybe even more time than before, but
Mm.
it's easier because I can do those dots and I'm not afraid and I'm confident. So it may take the same amount of time, but I really can paint longer and, I'm not as tired. So, this is my jumping off point, which is really, and I'm so excited to be able to have an artist talk, to share that excitement that, my goal is to try to um, continue to push myself, always remaining true to my roots of hyperrealism. But I kind of I guess right now I feel like I want to explore just try and stop me and that intensity of her emotions and do a body of work that represents this new path, right? um but at the same time I'm still going to be experimenting because it's been too much fun to I, I guess Chuck Close obviously lost his ability to paint and he figured out a new way to do so. So I'm after I work this all out, I'm kind of wanting to further deconstruct it all to see how can I break it, keep on breaking it down like Chuck Close did with the squares. You still looks like a photo from a distance, but the closer you get, you know what I mean? So I'm hopeful that, I'm going to be pushing that direction. So you know, this is my favorite painting. And it's really exciting to be able to, um, capture such intensity, which it came the one I'll finish off by just telling you maybe a little bit of the story behind this painting. Would you guys like to, you know, hear about that a little bit? I'll jump in. I'll say it anyway. Anyway, so what's fun about this is that I did the photo shoot during the time when the Me Too, I'm not going to call it movement, but Me Too was happening. And so things were really volatile. So during the photo shoot, the subject came up, and then she was telling me a story about how she wanted to start a business, and her father was a man of means, and so she went and she asked him, can I have some money? I want to do this, and she says no. He said no. I'm giving money to your brother. And
Mm.
so what I did is I instantly asked her, I said, why don't you just think about that for a split second and click? It was only one shot, all it took, and I managed to capture that. And so to me, I think that's why this painting is successful. And the two others that I've done that I've bailed on that are going to hit the trash didn't succeed because I didn't have that intense emotion connection, you know? So, I'm trying new photographs and try to capture that intensity. And then I'll be able to go where I hadn't gone before.
Well, And in our conversations, one thing I've realized is that you have this way of making people just feel comfortable around you. And I think because you have so much energy that other people really respond to that. Um, and I think that that might be one of the reasons why you're so good at capturing these moments, brief as they are. And it
Mhm.
sounds like, and from what I've read, that a lot of these moments happen kind of organically, where you're just relating to the model. You're not trying to necessarily draw anything out. It's you guys are sharing a story, you're sharing an experience, or and then there's a connection, and that you're able to capture that connection itself
Yeah.
in the photograph.
Yeah. No, it's I don't know where um I'm losing my train of thought. Sorry. It's it it does come organically. I think I stated it was saying something about it before is that, I always plan. I come up with these ideas. I interview the model. What does she like? She doesn't like. I did a series called, Bad Habits and Guilty Pleasures, where people, you saw Sativa Sunrise, the Vermeer looking painting. She's has a pot leaf on her head, and she just looks at the camera and she's just saying, so what? That's so what? But I have this conversation with them beforehand, and we have all these plans to do this, to do that. Never. It just always comes down to a simple conversation while I have the camera in my hand, and that intensity, I just capture it. And you're right, it's an organic, nice conversation having with someone.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I just
Intense conversation sometimes.
sure, like here.
Yeah,
um,
just a little.
yeah, and with this work specifically, you're talking about how you're now trying to push through hyper realism, and maybe where that is, you're not exactly sure yet, but it's just this really exciting like pivot point for you. And when I look at this work, and it doesn't come across, of course, in a picture on a screen as it does in real life. Um, but you can see just these really vibrant lines um, creasing her forehead, or you can see that when you look close that the highlights on her forehead and on her nose are just these lines and these dots, and it gives the portrait some sort of life to it, and its
Yes.
own energy. And I absolutely love the way that the ears and the earrings almost are out of focus and fade back, almost like an airbrushed quality about
Mhm.
them.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just, yeah.
It's an interesting, to talk maybe a little bit about the technique behind this one. You know, again, having studied with Paul McCormack, who's very traditional, master techniques,
Mhm.
and learning more about color, that there's no such thing as white, right? No such thing as black. Lots of other colors. The under layer to this is very traditional technique, where you block in all the colors and you create the form. And the dots and the lines are following that form. So, if you have a curve, the lines are curving with it. And so those
Mhm.
are traditional ways where normally, if you're doing looser paintings, you would, one stroke, but you're going with the grain, so to speak. Um, in this case, my dots and my colors and my lines are all not only just laying on top of each other, so it creates much more dimension to what you were saying, right? There's a skeleton below the block in, then all these dots that are just and lines going everywhere, but they're all the right colors too, because her highlight on the top left there, that's not white, that's blue. But yet, so right, if you go to the painting tomorrow, look at it and you'll look in
I
the
will.
dots there and you'll see, oh, it's all blue. So
Mhm.
I think that my ability to understand color more and making those dots blue as opposed to white
Mhm.
is, that's the hyper realism and color and you just put it all together and um, yeah, it worked. I got to try to do it again. Now I'm excited. I photographed. My son has been my next victim. He came home last weekend and he was talking about how a teacher just changed his whole idea about what he wanted to do for the rest of his life, which was amazing. And so he's talking about this and being silly. And there's just such like relief and joy in his face. And I have like a super cool new camera too that I've been dying to use. And so I took this photo and I'm like, oh yes, the connection, you know what I mean? That emotion. So it's not going to be angry, just try and stop me. She's, yeah, she's an angry Black woman. This won't be that, but there are lots of other things that I'm planning on doing. So
Yeah, well, I'm excited to see what comes next. And yeah. Um and unless you have anything else, Nadine, I think now might be a good time to open up the floor to some
yeah,
questions.
I'd love to answer some questions.
Okay, wonderful. So, yeah, if anyone has a question for Nadine, you're welcome to enter it into the chat box, or if you want to use the raise hand function and we can unmute you and you can ask her directly. Um,
Can I?
I'm so, oh, yeah, of course.
Oh, hi Nadine, how you doing?
Good. How are
Thanks.
you?
Good.
Good.
I have a comment. You can comment on my comment. I really don't have a question.
Oh, okay.
Aside from the methods that you've used to create your work, the interesting thing that I find particularly in this painting of Just Try and Stop Me, is the consistency or the continuum from the very first painting I ever saw of yours when we showed together in Chicago. And that's that and I know you don't do this in all of your work, but in this particular piece, you confront the viewer rather than depict an image that the viewer can evaluate or judge based upon certain, whether they be anomalies or whether they be existent compositional adds in the picture, or lighting or distance or depth of field or whatever. You have a plain background and a very forceful expression caught by your camera initially, and later on expressed through your painting. And as I look at this one, as I have studied it, I've wondered how the viewer, if I purchased this painting and I had it in my living room and I didn't know the story behind it, most of my friends, I would think, would go up and go, wow, she's really got an attitude on. And I said, well, no, it's a painting. You have to understand. No, she's an attitude. That's what they would see. The defiance comes through. But if it were another subject, that, as any painting that I have or that you may have of other artists, you look at it and you can kind of empathize with it, sympathize with it, become part of it, understand it, look at it in terms of other dynamics outside the focal point of expression. So I guess my comment is kind of turning into a question.
Okay.
I know that in my own work, I find myself once I'm finished and I know there's a certain point to not do anymore, just walk away. I'm inviting the viewer to come in and take part of the experience and to feel part of it and to actually enter into that reality and become part of that hyperreality, so to speak. So I guess the kind of question that I have is, how does the viewer come into this composition without feeling pushed away by a forceful expression?
Ooh.
I don't mean that, by the way, that's not I don't mean that in an aggressive way towards your work at all.
No, Dennis.
It's more quizzical than it is anything else.
Peter, can I jump in? I'm Rick Perzolo. I introduced myself at the beginning of today's session. I'm the director of the museum. it's interesting you said, if you owned this painting and it was hanging in your living room, I sort of feel like it is hanging in my living room for the time being. And I found it very interesting that our viewers, while I completely understand the comments you made about the confrontational nature of some of these pictures, our viewers have, particularly Natasha, you'll remember that I had two of our longtime members and friends come in, and they were drawn specifically to this picture and the experience of the model and where she was, where her head was. They didn't, I felt like they were sort of fell into the painting, that rich, solid background, and then the strong statement of the expression on her face and the way Nadine presents this. I sort of find it the antithesis of what you were saying. These were the paintings they were drawn to. We are a museum of realism, so we have a great deal of figural paintings. We have a massive collection. We have lots of contemporary work, and these pictures that Nadine has made in this exhibition really have felt, despite their confrontational nature, they felt like embraces to the viewer. I was very surprised that these two, I think I can use this word, although I'm glad they're not here, elderly women came in and they were enthralled with this picture. It's 24 inches square, and there are a number of larger pieces and a number that are less confrontational, and they stood in front of this for a half hour and talked about it. It was really interesting. I completely get your comments, and it's interesting how our viewers have taken it in a very different direction. I don't know, Nadine, if you have any thoughts there.
Well, I was advised years ago to not necessarily give away the story, to let the person who's viewing it, make their own story. I felt obligated to kind of tell a little bit more about this painting because I think it just explained a bit more, kind of like my process. But to Dennis's semi-question, if somebody had this on their wall, I would like to think that it piques their curiosity, in a way that they're kind of like, what is she thinking? Is she really that angry? Is she intensely staring at something? Is she, squinting her eyes to do something? It could be all of these things. So, I think if it's on a wall somewhere, people are going to interpret it the way that they'd like. But I think that there are two elements that really help bring the person in. What you touched on, and I forgot to say, Natasha, was the purposely of making the sides blurred, because it just brings the whole center of her face forward. And because it looks like a photo, you want to kind of get a little bit closer and look at the details, and they just start coming at you and you get lost in them because there's just so much going on. So I think between getting lost in those details and making your own story, then, it could be on somebody's wall. I mean, my self-portrait is going to be on somebody's wall. They're going to stare at me. That's a pretty intense face.
Not going to be on someone's wall until we let it go.
And you know what? And the art collector was really cool about that.
Yes, he was.
He bought it, and it was before I even gave it to you. And when he found out that it was extending till August, I hope that maybe we can arrange that he go there, that somehow we meet there and
I hope so.
see it.
Nadine, do you want to get to Paul's question that was in the chat box?
Oh.
Is male defiance different from female defiance? Are you thinking about, he's asking if you're thinking about doing more painted men. Is it different from male to female in terms of defiance, in terms of what you present?
I don't think that defiance as an emotion, as something you feel, is different. as an emotion. But because men and women are different in their emotions and how they, let it out, I think that how it will manifest itself will be different between men and women. Specifically, I don't know. I think it's whatever your baggage is.
Do you have plans for pictures of men?
I
And I
do.
see that Paul wants to jump in there too. Why don't you say something and then we'll let Nadine talk.
Okay. Where's Paul?
Uh,
I can't hear anything. So,
Paul's name is JETCI on screen.
Hi, sorry, I had my thing muted.
There he is.
hi.
More so, I'm interested in your take on artists not being able to capture the essence of men. Artists have mastered capturing women, but men, it seems really hard for artists to capture. And I think you could nail it.
What will I say? Yep, there you go. I don't paint a lot of men, and that was not intentional. I think I just somehow connected with female models. I think it started when I did my first nude and kind of went from there. But I am planning on painting men as part of the new series for sure. I talked about painting my son. So he's going to be next in line. And I I hope that I can, I've photographed men and they're pretty comfortable in front of the camera. So I'm feeling pretty optimistic that, I can have a nice conversation with them. I'm a tomboy, so I can feel like I can talk to men equally the same as women. And yeah, I'm excited because I haven't painted a lot of men. So it's just another challenge that, and we'll see, but you can see men and women next time. And, to your point though about painting men, I'm not quite sure. I think that I don't know why people don't want men on their walls. They definitely don't sell as well. That's what I've been told. I mean, I could be wrong, but it seems that women sell better.
I think you're right. Although I will say this, as I mentioned to Peter earlier, we are a museum of realism and contemporary realism. And we focus a lot of our collecting on works figure. And we have a lot of portraits of men, contemporary portraits of men in the collection. I guess I'm saying that just to say to you, Paul, you should come to this museum. I don't know where you are, but I hope you can jump in the car and come and see us. I hope you all can do that. But one of the things that Natasha and I are not ready to announce yet, but I'm just going to do it. And she'll probably come into my office and yell at me. But we're planning an exhibition next year about expressions of gender. So one of the things we did about 8 years ago was a show called Mail Order, and we explored portraits of men in the entire museum. We hung portraits of men. Classical art has always featured portraits of women, and in a very different way, honorific portraits of men as opposed to narrative portraits of men. And so we did a very different kind of exhibition about 8 years ago called Mail Order. And when Natasha came to us, we started talking about those paintings and what does it mean in 2021 and beyond, expressions of gender in portraiture, in painting, in art, and in life. So we're spending a year doing research into how we express physically and how we express in art gender. So I think all of what you said in your note and what you've talked about, really, you came to the right place. So come and see us. And I'm gonna, at the end of today's conversation, I'm gonna add a way that everybody can join the museum, follow us on Facebook, get our newsletter, and you'll learn more about what we do here at the Arnot. But I still do want to focus on Nadine since she's our spotlight star today. I see that Roxanne asked, what's the age of your oldest model? Do you focus on youth or do you want to talk about some older pictures and older models?
I'm open to painting anyone. It just so happens that the models that I picked, I like their face. It's, I go to a site called modelmayhem.com There's a lot of great models there. You don't find a lot of you don't find a lot of models that are older, so it's a little bit harder to find. That's not an excuse. I just haven't dug down deep. So Roxanne, she's good. She's a friend of mine. I have not gotten to that point yet, but like I said, I think I'm going to touch base on a lot of things going forward that I haven't touched base on. Painting men, nude men. Somebody asked me about that once. That can be done too. So who knows? Who knows? But it wasn't intentional to just have youth.
Pamela, she left a comment. She says, "You've turned the tables on the viewer here. The viewer becomes the subject of the model's gaze and isn't just in a voyeur's position relative to the woman. It's unsettling, but really establishes a connection between the viewer and the model."
Wow. Can I steal that?
I bet she'd be very willing. Pamela is one of our docents. So
Oh, okay.
somebody who's very
Hi,
interested in-
absolutely. Hello. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Pamela. Nice to meet you too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I that was well put. That was well put.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
thank you.
Yeah.
I love your work.
Oh, thank you, Pamela. Did we meet when I was there? I don't think so.
I don't believe so.
Next time.
But next time.
Next time, absolutely.
And then we have another question. I think it was sent just to the Arnot chat box, but it's from Jane Cottrell.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, she says, or asks, "When you lost sight in one eye, were you angry? If you were angry, is that anger somehow reflected in your paintings from that time, photorealism notwithstanding?"
You know, it's interesting that, yeah, I had moments of anger in the past few years, but, you know, because I sort of jumped into not dwelling on it, I haven't been angry. I know that I did sob horribly 2 years later when I was looking at the large painting Burger Hill that I painted for you guys for the show. I sat in front of it. I think I did a little video of it where I just started bawling. And it was the first time I think I ever cried that hard in the whole 2 years. So to your point is, I don't think I'm any angrier. You know, some people are angry people. I tend to be more of an angry person. I'm no angrier than I was before. But when I look at Just Try and Stop Me and all of those lines going everywhere, I do believe that there's probably some anger going into those strokes on that painting. Yes, definitely. So I think that, you know, that, yeah. So I'm not angry about it. It was just not my fault. It was just an unfortunate thing that happens. And I'll let the paint strokes be angry.
There you go. Does anyone have any other questions for Nadine?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if not, Nadine, how can people see more of your work or keep up to date with what you have going on?
Oh, well, I think the two best places I mean, they can always sign up on my newsletter on the homepage because I try to show all the paintings and their stories and different things every few months. So I won't inundate their mailboxes. But you can find me on Instagram or TikTok. And Instagram, I'm at Nadine Robbins Artist. And on TikTok, I'm at Nadine Robbins Art. And you'll find me there most of the time.
All right, great.
Or you can call with questions. I'm happy to take, I do. People call me and, you know, I love chatting, so.
Awesome. And then you have a work in an exhibition in Barcelona that just opened up too, right?
Yes. Oh my God, I didn't even talk about that. Oh, I'll do it. I know it's getting to 7:00, but you know, the painting that I sent to Mayam, which is the Museum Europe oh, I forget the A and M, but Meam, MEAM. I sent them a painting I did of Clementine, the black model here, where I pushed myself into entirely dots, the whole painting. I mean, it still has the block in, the shape underneath it, but above was just all these dots. And I mean, I adore the painting. I don't know if the museum was expecting that from me. I don't think so. But what I loved about it is that I really pushed myself way out of my comfort zone, doing all dots, but yet I still kept my hyperrealism to it. But I felt like I don't know if I want to do all dots. So I almost feel like, did I push further than I wanted? I don't know, but the painting is going to be, it was, I was asked to make the painting for International Women's Day. And the show opened up on March 8th, just this week, actually, Monday night. And unfortunately couldn't go there because of COVID. But, you know, it's there until May. And, you know, if anybody's in Europe, in Barcelona, go check it out. There's beautiful, it's like 80 paintings of women from all over the world, all realism. So highly recommend it. But thank you for bringing that up because, yeah, I got into an uncomfortable zone, but I learned a lot.
Amazing. Yeah, I just wanted to say congratulations. It's
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank
wonderful.
you.
So, yeah, but thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And Nadine, thank you so much.
Oh, you know, my pleasure. And thank you. You guys are really, you've done so much for me. I really appreciate it. And thank you guys. Thank John, all the people involved. It's a privilege to show with you guys, you know? Thank you.
Well, anybody who's here, just go to our website, use our links there. You can learn more about Nadine. You can learn more about us. And, you know, ultimately, Nadine, we did say that we want to help you sell some paintings too. So we'll send you to the right
Right. Just
galleries
call
and
me.
places. Yes, right.
25 people, just call me.
It's Nadine has been, you know, when we do the Three Americans show, we focus on an emerging artist or mid-career artist and a late career artist. And oddly, because the maturity of this work and the breadth of this collection that we're showing, it's funny that we put Nadine in the emerging artist category. We don't really think of her that way. And a way that we can help her seem less than emerging artist is to sell a lot of her work out into your collection. So if you collect, contact her, contact us. We can direct you to her gallerists, but certainly come and visit us. It's a true pleasure to show your work, to know you, Nadine. We're so impressed with what you make. It's an honor to have you with us, and we really appreciate you and all of our guests for spending an artist with us today.
No,
I'm spending an hour with us. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank
You make me cry. It's time to go. It's time to go.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you, everybody.
everybody. Really appreciate it. It was
Thank
fun.
you.
Look at the links in the chat box if you're looking for a way to connect.
So I'm looking at all the people here. This is great. I'm like Molly and good friends and family and Beth and oh my goodness, Roxanne, Dennis, Stephen Bennett. Hi guys, Pat. Oh my God, Paula Friedman. Oh my God, so many names. I'm probably missing a few, but thank you everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.